Good afternoon. I'm here to read chapter 9 of Poppy and Rye. This chapter is quite long, so I'm going to try to barrel through. It's called The Rain Falls. Poppy and Aerith trudged along in silence. With her mind taken up by the thoughts of the mouse with whom she had danced, she was grateful for the quiet. How so very much like Ragweed he was, and yet how different. While they looked alike, the stranger seemed softer, gentler than the bold, headstrong ragweed she had known. Certainly this mouse was more romantic. Was he, Poppy kept wondering, a dream or not? If he was a dream, he was the best dream she had ever had. Still, she hoped he was real. If her dance partner had been real, how could she find him again? Of course, it was impossible that he had been ragweed, but the mouse was clearly, perhaps there would be others. Did that mean she was nearing Ragweed's home? As they walked, Poppy hummed the snippet of tune she had composed for her dance. So preoccupied was Poppy by her musings that she failed to notice that Aerith was frowning and grumbling even more than usual. "What's the noise?" he suddenly asked. "It's me, humming." "I'm in no mood for music." "How come?" Forget it." Poppy paused to look at her friend closely. There was a look in his eyes she had never seen before. "Aerith," she said, suddenly alarmed. "What is it?" Aerith looked a little sheepish. Bumblebee flunk. Never mind." Poppy offered a worried glance, but chose to ask no more questions. In any case, she preferred to think about her dance. Once again, she began to hum her tune. The two friends continued west. When on occasion they met others on the path, a mole, a water rat, Poppy asked if they had heard of the brook. Much advice was offered, directions were given, and sure enough another brook was found. Small and calm, it was very much what Poppy imagined she was looking for. To her disappointment, no golden mice lived thereabout. A resident otter did inform Poppy and Aerith that there was another pretty shallow brook no farther than 2 hills beyond in that direction. The otter pointed due west. "I bet we will find the right one this time," Poppy, ever hopeful, said to Aerith as they started again. Aerith grew even more gloomy. Though the day had begun bright and clear, the sky had turned gray and cloudy, the air heavy. Treetops flicked and bobbed in a humid breeze. Birds flew high and fast. Clearly a storm was coming. With new urgency, Poppy and Aerith trudged toward the crest of the second hill. "Maybe when we get to the top we'll see the brook that the otter mentioned," Poppy said. "Soon as we get to the top of that hill," Aerith proclaimed, "I'm going back home." "Why?" "I'm sick of walking," the porcupine replied. From the crest of the hill they looked down into a valley. At the bottom was a pond. "No brook," Aerith said with palpable relief. "Let's go home." "Well, actually," Poppy pointed out, "there's a brook leading into the pond and out of it." Aerith muttered something unintelligible under his breath. Then he said, "It's going to rain." "Aerith," Poppy said, "rain won't hurt us. I'm going to check that brook." Even as they stood, drops began to fall. At first it came slowly, great plops of water. Then, while lightning crackled off to the distant north and thunder followed, a steady drizzle began to fall. Aerith wheeled about and moved toward a clump of trees. "Where are you going?" Poppy called. "Where do you think, Toadwort? Out of the rain." "Aerith, I want to explore that brook." "Buzzard fraps," the porcupine muttered. Poppy watched Aerith go. "Will you promise to stay there until I search a bit?" she called after him. "I never promise anything." "How will I know where you are?" "Watch my tracks." Poppy waited until Aerith reached a cottonwood tree and started to climb it. She noted its position, then hurried down the path, by now falling steadily. For his part, Aerith looked around, saw which way Poppy was going, down the other side of the hill, then curled himself into a tight ball and closed his eyes. "I never should have come," he muttered. "Ragweed. Nothing but ragweed. I thought I was her best friend." Poppy was approaching the pond. Halfway down the hill, she could see that it had been created by beavers. At one end was a dam, and Poppy could even observe a number of beavers hard at work. Some were swimming upon the pond's surface. Others were laboring on lodges. A few were working on the main dam, building it higher. At the far side of the pond, a particularly large fat beaver was gnawing upon the trunk of an aspen tree. There was a sharp crack as the tree snapped and tumbled to earth, landing with a crash. At the sound, all the beavers in the pond looked around. When they saw it was a tree that had fallen, they began to slap the pond surface with their tails. Poppy, standing in the rain, looked on, heard someone say, "Awful." She turned. Sitting beneath a large toadstool, protected from the rain, was a golden mouse. Poppy's heart fluttered. For an instant she thought it was the one with whom she had danced. Then she saw that this mouse, though tall and thin, was a female. "Hello," Poppy said. The mouse looked beyond Poppy. "Oh, hi," she said. She sounded unhappy. "Do you live around here?" Poppy asked. "Yes." Are there a lot of you around?" Poppy inquired. "I mean, golden mice?" The mouse looked down at herself as if she had never considered the question before. "I suppose." "My name is Poppy," Poppy said. "I'm a deer mouse." "My name is Thistle," said the other. "How come you're standing in the rain?" "Oh, right, I am. May I join you?" "Sure." Poppy darted under the cover of the toadstool. Thistle, making room, asked, "Where are you from?" "Back east, over by Dimwood Forest." "Never heard of it," Thistle said with polite indifference. She had turned back to stare down at the pond. Water dripped from around the edges of the toadstool like a tattered curtain. "I hate beavers," Thistle said. "Why?" "When they made that pond, they ruined everything for everybody. The brook used to be so cool." Poppy's heart gave a lurch. "Is that what you called it?" she asked, her voice faltering. "The brook?" Thistle nodded. "You wouldn't think it used to be small and calm. Look at it now," she said sadly. Then she added, "Our home was right on the banks of the brook. No more. Flooded out. We had to move away because of them." Poppy was trying to restrain her growing excitement. "Thistle," Poppy said nervously. "What? Does the name ragweed mean anything to you?" Thistle had been gazing mournfully down at the pond. At the name she whirled about. "Ragweed!" she cried. "That's my brother. Do you know him? Have you seen him? Have you any idea where he is? Is he coming back? I can't tell you how much we need him." Instead of answering Thistle's barrage of questions, Poppy asked one of her own. "Are your parents named Clover and Valerian?" "How did you know? Ragweed must have told you, but that means you do know him. Oh, man, you got to see my parents. Our nest isn't far," she went on. "Come on, please, tell me about Ragweed. What's he doing? You don't know how much we miss him. Do you know when he's coming? We really need him to come back. I've got tons of brothers, but Ragweed is the best." Managing to push down her emotions, but speaking in a strained voice, Poppy said, "I think I better talk to your parents." Thistle darted into the rain. "I'll take you. What did you say your name was?" "Poppy." "Poppy, you won't believe how glad my parents will be to see you." With Thistle looking over her shoulder to make sure Poppy was following, the two mice made their way through the rain along the path that led uphill from the pond. The farther they went, the more nervous Poppy became. "It's just over here," Thistle kept calling. They had come to a large boulder embedded in an outcropping of earth. A variety of shrubs and flowers rimmed the rock. In the rain, they seemed shrunken and cold. Poppy herself was thoroughly soaked, as well as trembling. The wetness came from the rain, but the trembling came from her emotions. Though Thistle was just as wet, she was too excited to notice Poppy's state. "Just follow me," the young mouse said, darting along the base of the rock, then plunging into the small hole, which was screened by some flowering rose crown. At the entry hole, Poppy paused to give herself strength. "Why did I ever want to do this?" she wondered. Thistle popped back out of the hole. "Come on," she called, then plunged down the tunnel again. A reluctant Poppy moved at a slower pace. She could hear Thistle yell, "Ma, Pa, everyone! Guess what? Someone's come with news about Ragweed." Full of dread, wishing the tunnel were 100 miles long, Poppy crept the whole way. All the same, within moments, she entered the nest. In a glance, Poppy saw the nest for what it was, a single shabby room stuffed with golden mice. Golden mice tended to be bigger than deer mice, so Poppy's first sensation was not only that there were a lot of them, but that they all seemed quite large. But Poppy had not the slightest doubt she was in the presence of Ragweed's family. The resemblance was uncanny. It was as if she was in a room full of familiar ghosts. She felt weak. There were the two adults, Clover and Valerian, plus 11 children. The children ranged from fully grown young adults to squeaking infants, one of which was being burped on Clover's shoulder. When Poppy entered the nest, the golden mice stared at her with twitching ears and wide eyes. "This is Poppy," Thistle announced excitedly. "How do," Valerian said, standing tall and thin and fussing with his whiskers. There was a tremor in his voice. Clover, very pale, said nothing. Her black eyes, open wide, just stared at Poppy. Her whiskers were shaking. Thistle cried, "Poppy knows all about ragweed, don't you?" Poppy was so choked with emotion, it was all she could do to nod a response and gaze from face to face. Suddenly she stopped. At the back of the pack was the mouse she had danced with. There was the same sweet, soft, noble face, the same right ear with a notch. Their eyes met and held. Poppy's heart fluttered. Grief, joy, relief, sadness, all mingled, but in such confusion she hardly knew what she felt. She lowered her eyes. Valerian, his voice husky, spoke out. "My dear Miss Mouse, do you have some news about our son Ragweed?" "What's happened to him?" Clover blurted out. When is he coming home?" Poppy found it impossible to speak. Instead, she sought out the face of her dancing partner. Once again their eyes met. How she wished he were not there. How she wished she was not going to say what she had to say. "Please," she heard Clover beg, as if from some distant place, "I really must know." As Clover spoke, she stood up, infant still in her arms, and reached a paw to touch Valerian, as if she were in need of steadying. Her round, heavy body seemed uncertain on her stumpy legs. Poppy turned back to Clover. "I'm afraid Ragweed—" The next word stuck. She could not speak the word. She had to force it out. "Ragweed is dead," she finally said, her voice tiny. Utter silence. "Dead?" A small voice, a youngster's, echoed. "Dead?" Clover repeated. Poppy could only nod yes. Valerian cleared his throat. "But how?" he managed to ask. "An owl killed him." "An owl," someone said. Then there was silence again. Suddenly Clover sat down. "My own poor, sweet boy," she sobbed. "Can you tell us more?" Valerian asked in a choked voice. Poppy closed her eyes. When she opened them, she sought out the face of the mouse with whom she had danced. When she found it, it was full of awful sadness. We were in love," Poppy said. "We were going to marry." "Oh, my," Clover murmured, putting a paw to her trembling lips. Valerian swallowed hard, cleared his throat, and said, "Poppy, we thank you for coming and telling us." He wiped a tear from one cheek, then the other. "I thought you would want to know," Poppy said softly. "That's why I came." The golden mice stared at Poppy as if she had spoken a strange language. Clover, letting escape a small squeak, even as she stroked the baby she was holding, said, "It's a terrible thing to live beyond your own children." With great effort, Valerian drew himself up. "Poppy, it was generous of you to come so far to bring us the news. You must be tired." "I'm all right," Poppy said. "You're welcome to stay with us as long as you like," he added. This is not where Ragweed was brought up. We've fallen on hard times, but our nest is your nest." "The beavers sank our nest," one of the young mice shouted. All the children began to talk at once. "Poppy, I must ask you something," Clover suddenly said. In an instant the nest became quiet again. "Yes, please," Poppy said. "I hope you loved my son very much," Clover said. Poppy did not answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her toes, then up and around, seeking the face of the one with whom she had danced. He was gazing at her with a look of profound pain. "Did you love him?" Clover pressed. The question seemed urgent. "Yes," Poppy said, "I did. Very much." "Oh, my dear," Clover cried. Thrusting the baby she'd been holding into Valerian's paws, she rushed over to Poppy and gave her an engulfing hug. Poppy hugged her back. As she did, she saw from the corner of an eye the mouse she had danced with, his face awash with grief, rush past and fling himself up the tunnel. Okay, so Poppy has delivered the sad news to Clover and Valerian, but now at least she has found Rye and his family, and we'll see what happens next. Have a great afternoon, everybody.